If you ever smoked a brisket and ended up with dry, tough meat, you're not alone. I've been barbecuing in my backyard for over a decade, and I've had my fair share of brisket disasters. After years of trial and error, I figured out exactly what it takes to get a juicy, tender brisket every single time. Today, I'm going to show you how to do the same. So let's get started. It all starts with picking the right brisket and prepping it properly. Get this step wrong, and you're already fighting an uphill battle. When you're at the store, look for a brisket with good marbling, those thin streaks of fat running through the meat. More marbling means more flavor and better moisture retention. And size matters too. A whole packer brisket, somewhere between 12 and 16 pounds, is ideal for smoking. If the fat cap is thicker than about 1/4 of an inch, that's too much and it won't render properly. And if you see a brisket that's just flat, you might want to skip it. The point has more fat, which helps keep everything juicy. The right balance of fat is key. Not too much, not too little. Remove any excess, but leave just enough to protect the meat and keep it from drying out. Start by trimming off the hard. This stuff won't render down and can block smoke absorption. And then even out the fat cap so it's about 1/4 inch thick all the way around. If you see any thin edges, trim them off too. Otherwise, they'll dry out before the rest of the brisket is done. A properly trimmed brisket will cook more evenly, absorb more smoke, and help block in moisture. When it comes to seasoning your brisket, you don't need to overthink it. Sometimes simple is best. A classic Texas-style rub of kosher salt and coarse black pepper is all you need to let that beefy flavor shine. Just sprinkle it on generously, press it in, and make sure you hit every side, including the edges. But if you want to kick things up a notch, try something like Fire and Smoke Society's Thundering Longhorn. This rub isn't just salt and pepper. It also has cumin, ancho chili, espresso, oregano, and garlic. That combo brings a bold, smoky, and slightly spicy kick that pairs beautifully with the brisket. Espresso and the ancho chili add this deep, rich flavor that makes every bite more interesting. No matter which rub you go with, the goal is the same. Build that bark, enhance the moisture retention, and lock in the flavor. Now, the brisket's seasoned and ready to go. It's time to fire up the smoker and set it up for success. Even the best brisket can turn into dry chew you regret if your smoker isn't set up right. But don't worry, I've got you covered. First things first, keep your smoker at 225 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the magic number. It's slow enough to break down all that tough connective tissue, but not so slow that you're going to be out there all night. So if you crank it too high, you're going to dry it out. And if you leave it too low, well, I hope you're not in a hurry. Now, the question I hear all the time is, how long is this thing going to take? The truth? A brisket is done when it's done. But having a rough estimate makes life easier. That's why I put together a brisket time chart with estimated cook times based on weight and temperature. Drop brisket in the comments and I'll send the link to you. When it comes to smoking wood, hickory or post oak is the classic go-to. It burns clean and steady without overpowering the meat. Want a little extra flavor? Throw in some apple wood. It adds a touch of sweetness and it pairs perfectly with brisket. Nobody wants a brisket that tastes like a burnout campfire. You're looking for thin, blue smoke, not thick white clouds. Using wood chugs, space them out so that they burn slowly instead of flaring up all at once. Running a pellet or offset smoker, keep those vents open just enough for good airflow. Clean fire, clean smoke. Alright, let's get the brisket on the smoker. The point, the thicker, fattier end, should face the heat source to protect the leaner flat from drying out. And that whole fat cat up or down debate, here's the deal. Heat from down below, the fat cap down acts as a shield. Heat from the side, fat cat up. Lets the juices run down and baste the meat. At the end of the day, the secret to a juicy brisket is simple. Steady heat and good airflow. Think of your smoker like an oven. Consistency is everything. Now that we locked in at 225 degrees Fahrenheit, the waiting game begins. But don't worry, waiting doesn't mean doing nothing. There's a few tricks to locking in that moisture and building that perfect bark. Let's get into it. And this is where most people go wrong. So let's talk about how to keep your brisket from drying out. Now you might have heard that spritzing keeps the brisket moist, but if you do it too soon, you'll ruin the bark. What is the right time to start spritzing? After 3 to 4 hours when the bark is fully set. If you touch the surface and it's dry and firm and not coming off on your fingers, it's ready. As for what to spritz with, apple cider vinegar, beef broth, or even just water will do the job. I typically use water because you're not adding flavor here. just moisture to prevent the surface from drying out too fast. And here's another myth to bust. You don't need to spritz every 30 minutes. Every hour or so is plenty. Too much spritzing can actually slow the cook down. Next up, wrapping. This is where you lock in moisture while still keeping the bark intact. You've got two main options here: butcher paper or foil. Foil speeds up the cook and traps more moisture, but it can soften the bark. Butcher paper is a happy medium. It protects the meat while still letting it breathe. The key is wrapping it at the right time, when the brisket hits the stall, around 165 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. If you wrap too early, you'll steam the bark and lose that crispy texture. Now here's a pro move that saves trial call without sacrificing quality. Once the brisket is wrapped, we're moving it to a 300 degree Fahrenheit oven to finish. At this point, the meat isn't going to take on any more smoke flavor, so keeping it in the smoker just burns through fuel for no reason. Instead, we transfer it to the oven and let it ride until it reaches 203 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the number for perfectly rendered fat and melt in your mouth tenderness. Now here are some common mistakes. One of the biggest mistakes is panicking during the stall. Your brisket might sit at the same temperature for an hour or more. This is totally normal. The moisture is evaporating, cooling on the surface and slowing the cook. Just hold steady and it will push through. All right, we locked in the moisture, pushed through the stall, and now it's time for the most important part, letting the brisket rest. Here's the thing, how you rest and slice your brisket is just as important as how you cook it. Get this part wrong and all the effort goes to waste. I know it's tempting to slice right in, but hold up. If you cut into it too soon, all those juices are going to run right onto the cutting board instead of staying inside of the meat where they belong. Instead, let it rest at least an hour, but ideally 2 to 4 hours. This gives the juices time to settle back in, making every bite more tender and flavorful. Now here's what I've learned from cooking a lot of briskets. I like to let the internal temperature drop to somewhere between 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit before slicing. If it dips into the 140 degrees Fahrenheit-ish range, the brisket starts to firm up too much. On the other hand, if it's still 170 or 180 degrees Fahrenheit, it might be too hot to handle, and the juices won't have enough time to redistribute. Finding that sweet spot makes a big difference in texture and moisture. Not ready to slice yet? No problem. A simple cooler can hold your brisket for hours. Just wrap it up, place it in a cooler lined with towels, and throw another towel on top for insulation. This keeps it at a perfect serving temperature without overcooking it. All right, now it's time to slice, but here's where a lot of people mess up. You gotta cut against the grain. For the flat, slice straight against the grain into pencil-thin slices. For the point, the grain changes direction here, so rotate it slightly and keep slicing against the grain. Cut it the wrong way, and you'll end up with chewy bites instead of tender, melt-in-your-mouth brisket. Now for the best part. Let's take a look at what we got. Look at that. It's tender, it's juicy, and it's packed with smoky flavor. That bark, perfect. That smoke ring, textbook. And the smell, next level. If you want a summary of this video and the complete step-by-step process, I've dropped a link in the comments. Now you know how to smoke a brisket without drying it out. Juicy and tender with that deep smoky flavor. This is what it's all about. And if you want to see how to perfectly smoke ribs every single time, check out this video right here. I'll see you there.